Welcome to the More Than Fitness podcast.
And once again, we are live from my parents' basement. I'm in for the weekend. You're seeing them, got to grab a few things. Heading back to Lexington tomorrow, where I can resume life as normal. I feel like I need to give a heads up whenever I'm here in the basement because there's like 14 other people in this house right now. And then there's 2 dogs and there's random noises that you may hear. I'm in the basement. I'm not, in my typical office space with Zion the zebra, the little cat and my plant. So I always feel obliged to give that little disclaimer. Nonetheless, another great Minisode for you guys. So welcome to Minisode number 33 on the More Than Fitness podcast. And this is I'm still trying to figure out the name for this one. Typically I try to figure out these names beforehand so that I can get a good idea, but for the most part, what I want to call this is like 4 lessons that I've learned from quarantine. And I want to try and maybe make it something less basic than that. But by the time you're watching this, you're clearly going to know what the title is. So if it is 4 lessons from quarantine, don't judge me. Either way, this is going to be a good episode because these things, I feel like it's more so like 4 not so talked about lessons from quarantine, because you see probably tons of people on Instagram or other social media that they're giving their opinions on what they've learned during quarantine, what's the main outcomes from all of this, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. First off, of course, as always, I'm an idiot. Don't listen to me about any of this stuff, because what the hell do I know? I'm still just going off my own biased opinions, and they are simply that, opinions, because I'm not an expert in any of this stuff. I don't even know why I'm giving this disclaimer, because I'm not even fucking talking about the quarantine, to be honest. At least like, the epidemiology of the quarantine or what you believe or whatever. But I'm just going to go ahead and jump right into it. The first lesson that I have learned from quarantine is that our individual actions matter more than we think. And whenever you have something like this pandemic and you can see the effects that your action or inaction can have on a massive part of the world, like think about, let's just say this did originate in China, right? From some dude eating a bat or something. I don't know if that's been proved or not. However, let's just say it is from one person who wasn't very cautious about what they were eating, or the market that it was the bat they bought the bat from, the sanitary, somebody fucked up somewhere, right? Like along the chain of command, along all of this, somebody screwed up pretty badly. And whether if it's a freaking man-made virus in China from a lab or something, somebody screwed up because everyone is paying for this, right? So yeah, there's someone out there that really screwed up and that really affected the entire world, basically. So what I think is interesting, and then to take it down to more of a practical sense that relates to you and I, it's just like we are literally saving lives by listening to the government's safety recommendations on these things. We are saving lives by staying home and wearing masks and isolating people who are older or they have other conditions that could make them more susceptible to this virus, and trying to stay 6 feet apart from each other and trying to avoid large gatherings and things. So I think what this shows is that if every single what I like to relate this to is voting, because I was one of those people who was just like, okay, my vote doesn't really matter, right? Whoever I vote for, it doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. I think that would be a very bad way to think about things. Like, consider it, what if everybody thought that way, right? We wouldn't have a democracy, because then if no one thought that their vote counted, no one would end up voting, or only a few select people would be voting. And then the sample size would be so skewed on what the people actually want that, we're screwed just from the idea of thinking, oh, my vote doesn't matter. So whenever you have our choices as individuals to either go outside and like hang out with friends and see other people, or not wear masks, or whatever, you are making a choice that will affect others, whether you believe it or not. Sure, you may be safe, but I think this is one of the very first times where we have had to come together as a collective, where it's us and not me. Some people are still, selfish douchebags and things, and think that the world revolves around them and that they're safe and they have these rights and things like that. I just think that is a very selfish way to look at things, to be honest. And this has nothing to do with my political views or anything like that. Again, I'm going to leave the epidemiology and virology and the recommendations to large masses of people to people way smarter than I am. But I think that this quarantine has done a very good job at showing us just how important our own individual actions can ripple out and affect hundreds among thousands of people, especially whenever it comes to some type of pandemic or virus or something, but even to another extent of our own actions, as far as whatever, just small things, as far as like helping others, making an impact on other people, like littering or something, like climate change and things. It's like we all have a role in this. And if we think that our role doesn't matter, if you broaden that out to a larger view and everybody started to think that way, it would be a very dangerous way to live. And if you understand that, then you understand, okay, maybe what I do does matter a lot more than I think. All right. And the second lesson is that normal life is fragile. So I have normal life in quotes. So normal life is fragile, and our perception of it is an illusion due to habitual repetition. And to put it in more simple terms, it's just like what we thought as normal before this quarantine and before this virus and everything else is not normal anymore. So it's relative, right? And going forward, normal life is going to forever, or it'll forever be different, because I think that this virus is kind of poked holes in a lot of the ways that we lived before this. But for the most part, I think things will eventually get back to normal. I think there's still going to be whatever concerts, sports games, things like that. I think that will go back to normal. However, our perception of what quote unquote normal life is, our day to day, due to living the same day in, day out, at least, from most standpoints, right? We're living relatively the same on a day-to-day basis. But whenever you throw a wrench in that habitual repetition that is your daily life, like the coronavirus, and you end up losing your job, or your loved ones end up losing their job, or someone loses their life, someone you love loses their life, you cause someone to potentially get sick because of your inability to be cautious, or your refusal to be cautious, right? But yeah, so our perception of this, our perception of what is quote unquote normal on a daily basis, it's very fragile, in the sense that no one could have predicted this. And there's so much that we take for granted on a day-to-day basis that we're just like, oh yeah, restaurants will always be open. I'll always be able to go to sports games. I'll always be able to go to the gym, right? Like I'll be able to go to the store and buy food whenever I want to. Well, not necessarily, right? Not unless shit goes down like this, and there's a big pandemic, and then everybody is affected by this thing, that this invisible enemy. Basically, I think that's what Trump said, actually. But whatever, it's accurate. An invisible enemy. That's exactly what this is, and it's thrown a big wrench into every single one of our lives. Even the people who are really high up. It doesn't matter if you're rich, if you're poor, if you have connections, you don't have connections. you're the president, like, you know what I'm saying? It does not matter who you are. Your life can be interrupted at any moment. And I think it's important to not take that for granted, because a lot of people say, oh, it's giving me perspective and things like that. It's like, yeah, I agree. But it's like, what can we take from that moving forward? And I think that is to understand and recognize that many of the things that we love and care about, and partake in on a regular basis can be taken away from us in almost an instant. And that can be very scary. But I think it's also important to make us more self-sufficient, right? Because it's backing us into a corner. Like, what the fuck are you really made of during this time? And only the people who aren't freaking out and losing their shit and spreading misinformation, and reacting irrationally are the ones who are doing okay during this time, possibly even making progress, no matter how small or in maybe different ways than they normally are. However, life goes on, right? And you have to be adaptable, because shit like this has happened before and humans have adapted over and over and over again. But it's just like, statistically, like, something like this could easily happen again within your lifetime, possibly even more than once. So I think it's important to understand that normal life is very fragile and can be taken away from us at any time. So make sure you're on your shit. Frankly, like, that's what it is. Make sure that you are self-sufficient. Like, make sure that you mentally and physically check in with yourself on a regular basis. Make sure that you are strong enough to endure something like this, and you are the steadfast rock in this moment of chaos whenever everyone else is freaking out. I think that's important. Okay, lesson number 3 is, which piggybacking off of number 2, is knowing basic skills could potentially save your life. And whenever I say basic skills, I mean such as cooking, self-defense, possibly, right? Possibly owning a gun. Again, I'm not going into politics with this. I don't know shit about this. I know there's plenty of statistics. I know there's plenty of evidence or whatever on both sides of owning a gun or not owning a gun. But shit gets very real in places where guns are legal, right? And some of you may have seen the news where you see these big long lines of people standing outside of gun stores. And it's just like, if guns are going to be legal and you don't have one because you don't think that it's okay, which I understand and I respect completely, don't get me wrong. However, when shit gets real and shit hits the fan and other people have guns and you do not, and they're trying to feed their children and you're trying to feed your children, well, Charles Darwin is coming into play here. And it's just like, they are going to force you out of that position. Again, I'm obviously being hyperbolic, and this is not what it has come to during this time, but you could see how quickly people are to, I don't want to say overreact is necessarily the bad word, but prepare for the worst, I think. So you see all those, like, why are all those people outside the gun store? Because they are afraid that something bad is going to happen and they're not going to be prepared. Even people who have been against guns for the longest periods of time, I heard that a lot of those people even went to go get a handgun or something like that in case shit did go down. Because if you can't get to the grocery store, if things, you know what I'm saying? Like, again, this is some crazy apocalyptic scenario. But it's like, in the beginning of this, when things were unknown and you see on the news and see people on social media freaking out because all the toilet paper's gone, a lot of the food isn't stocked up yet. People are, they're trying to get their own. It's like, shit gets sketchy very quickly. And so if you don't know how to cook, if you don't have food somewhat stored, or know what foods to get, or have money saved up, I think that's another big thing that a lot of people are going to take from this, to be a little bit less free spending with your cash, and make sure that you've got your shit taken care of. And again, I know this is I keep backtracking on these, but it's important to cover both sides, because I know people are living paycheck to paycheck. shit is real out there. However, going forward, it's like I think you need to adapt, like get smarter, make more money somehow, figure it out. Like, I don't think to say that it's impossible, I think is not fair. So this is kind of putting a lot of people's back against the wall, and it's like, all right, like if shit does hit the fan, will you be ready? Will you know how to cook food or defend yourself or defend your family, or be able to take care of yourself and take care of people around you? And it's also interesting to see how people have reacted during this time, whether it's your close family and friends, and then also big time companies and things like that, to see how people really react whenever things go down and the future is very unknown. So yeah, number 3 is knowing basic skills could potentially save your life if something more apocalyptic could happen from something like this. I'm not saying that coronavirus is it, but I think it's important to think about. All right, now I'm on 16 minutes, so I'm going to hustle up on this fourth one because I can ramble. The fourth one is our vices and attachment to things have been illuminated and exposed. And so I was mostly pertaining to fitness and nutrition on this one. A lot of people, the gym is escapism for them, and you can kind of distract yourself. And so is like hanging out with friends or going out to bars or something like that. Whenever you're stuck in your home, it makes you face a lot of realities that you haven't faced. A lot of demons come out from the woodworks that you haven't confronted, and you're forced to confront them because of the enforced solitude that you have, and potentially with your loved ones as well. So I think divorce rates are might be up a little bit more after all of this is over. It's just a lot of people had to come to grips with things that they have been hiding from or distracting themselves from during this time. And I think for some people, they're coming out the other side stronger, but for other people, it has resulted in, drug use or depressions or what. And I feel for those people. I'm not saying that they're weak people for doing that. But I think it's important to keep yourself in check and check in with yourself occasionally. Be like, okay, what have I been avoiding? What have I not been self-reflecting on enough? And how can I change that going on in the future? And what I was saying with the gym is that for a lot of people, this is that escapism. They use the gym to escape a lot of their problems, whether that comes to their own disordered eating, possibly, and they're using that to compensate. They're using the gym to compensate for those calories eaten, or going to the gym and not uptaking other responsibilities that they need to be taken care of, or they have their identity attached to this certain look that they have, their body image. And whenever they don't look that certain way, they feel lesser and they get scared and they get defensive and they freak out, right? So this is a good time to try and recognize those vices that we have and those attachments that we have to these certain things that, again, could be taken away from this. It's why looking for external motivators and senses of identity and needing things to have a positive sense of self-worth and be proud of who you are as a person can be fickle and not the best move, to be honest, because it can be taken away from you. So yeah, I'm going to sum this up real quick. The 4 lessons are: number 1, our individual actions matter more than we think. Number 2, normal life is fragile and our perception of it is an illusion due to habitual repetition. Number 3 is knowing basic skills could potentially save your life. And number 4 is our vices and attachment to things have been illuminated and exposed. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. That is Minisode number can't speak. Made it almost to the end. That is Minisode number 33 on the More Than Fitness podcast. As always, thank you so much for listening and for watching. See ya.